Okay, great. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our first public research involvement forum. Just some housekeeping before I do the introductions. Obviously, if you've got any noise in the background, just mute your microphones. And if when you're ready to speak, then you can obviously just raise your hand if you want. You can raise it virtually, or you can raise it through the platform if you're familiar with that. You can also type in things in the chat function as well, and then I will check that and I can read that and ask you to elaborate on it. I also ask that we keep it respectful. Obviously, I don't think we'll have a problem with it being such a small group, but I still have to mention it. So let's wait for people to finish, and I will make sure everyone's got an opportunity to discuss their point, or to get their point across. Basically, I think it's just really an open discussion, and the purpose of having this, running these monthly sessions is some of you might be familiar with the National Institute for Health Research, which is also known as the NIHR. And what this body is, it's funded by the Department of Health and Social Care in England to basically support the development and evaluation of research. So there's lots of things that sit under this big umbrella organization. It sits next to the NHS, so it's not part of the NHS, we sit alongside it. So the NHS focuses on just purely patient care, and the NIHR focuses purely on the research and making sure we develop new treatments or support the development of anything that can help patients that use the NHS to recover quicker or get diagnosed quicker. So that's a brief summary of what the NIHR is. There's many different bits that sit underneath it that all do different things. But our bit, which is the Surgical MedTech Cooperative, we are one of 11 cooperatives, and our focus is to work on anything that is not pharmaceutical related. So anyone, companies, doctors, academics, if they want to develop any new devices, anything to do with artificial intelligence, anything software enabled, as long as it doesn't have a pharmaceutical action, that is what we're there for. And this support can include things like helping them manufacture a prototype device so that you can actually see it, play around with it, and see how it can work on a patient or in theaters. It also includes things like making sure the technologies they develop are actually going to be used in practice. Because what tends to happen a lot, especially in medical technology, is there are a lot of devices, and you'll see this in the newspaper that, oh, the NHS has turned down this particular thing and no one's interested, but it can save lives. And the role of the NIHR is to actually make sure that those claims are true. Because what tends to happen is sometimes when people develop technologies, they don't verify that a technology will be useful in the NHS. So the technology itself might be brilliant, it might be savvy. Everyone will agree that this is a really brilliant technology. But if the NHS can't demonstrate that it's going to make patients better, or it's going to help in the diagnosis, or it's going to speed up things, then they're not going to spend money to get that particular technology in, because as we're all familiar, we pay taxes that go into there. They don't want to waste taxpayers' money on things that aren't proven. So that's where we come in, is if there's any technology that is good but doesn't meet the patient need, is basically kill it quickly so that people don't spend a lot of time and money and effort into something that's not going to be used. So that is how we work. There's different cooperatives that deal with different clinical areas, but the way we work is roughly the same. We also do a lot of clinical trials and health economics. And that's mainly making sure that whatever clinical trials companies have, those clinical trials are answering the questions that the NHS wants answered, because anyone can set up a clinical trial, but it's got to ask the right questions. It's a similar thing with health economics as well. So it's proving that if you do actually get this into clinical practice, is it going to save the NHS money, or is it actually going to cost it money? So just as an example, there was a couple of years ago, there was something about a bowel cancer test which the patients could use. So you could go on a website, you answer all the questions, and then it tells you, well, actually, you need to be seen in hospital. And what this did was it actually increased the workload of GPs, because now everyone was saying the system needs them to have a procedure done at the hospital. And obviously not everybody wants to do that. So there are issues around technology in terms of it can solve one problem in one area, but create a bigger problem somewhere else. And that's what we're also there to avoid. So that is the Surgical MedTech Cooperative in a nutshell. And that's roughly what the NIHR does across all the different areas. They do have another bit that looks at pharmaceuticals, but the pharmaceutical companies are easier, mainly because their process is highly regulated and they have to go through those particular steps. So we don't see similar problems with them. We have a patient and public involvement committee, and on that committee, we recruit members who basically help guide the direction of the work that we do. Because the cooperative is filled with people like myself, who haven't had a lot of medical procedures done, who haven't had a lot of experience being a patient in the NHS, but we are tasked with making sure that all this technology gets into the NHS. But chances are most of us are not going to use it. And what we want our PPI committee, which is the acronym that's associated with that, is we want them to actually tell us what are the things that are important, where can the patient voice actually input, where is it most useful, what are the things we should do less of, what are the things we should do more of. And that is where our PPI committee members come in. And we also have a separate PPI group. And these are people that get notified of any opportunities to get involved in any project work, grant funding applications, anything that we do. So they don't necessarily sit on a committee, but they get involved in a lot of focus groups. And I'll take this opportunity, first of all, to introduce Manoj Mistry. So he sits on our PPI committee. Manoj, I think you've been a member now for almost 2 years. So if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm Manoj Mistry. I'm a British Indian from Greater Manchester. I'm a family carer. I applied and got accepted to be a public contributor on the management committee at MedTech, as V has indicated, about 2 years ago. So I attend meetings that are every 2 months, so 6 meetings in a year, I think roughly. And whilst various professors, academics, clinicians are having their discussions, I feel it's my remit to always ensure that they take the patient, the carer, the family member's perspective on board when they're thinking about any medical device, intervention, innovation, or even items that us patients may be using, such as gowns that we might be wearing while we're undergoing surgery that might be fitted with, say, an electrical device that monitors maybe some performance indicator of our body. So always make sure they bear the patient, carer, family perspective in mind. I've enjoyed my role, and in particular what V mentioned, the focus group, they've been absolutely smashing. I think they started about 9 months ago, roughly less than a year ago. So one of these colleagues usually arranges the focus groups. They're held for 90 minutes. So a clinician or an academic from the University of Leeds, who's associated with Leeds Surgical MedTech, will introduce an idea themselves, or it could be an outside inventor, innovator that will talk about a potential innovation that could be implemented within the NHS. And we're asked for our views and opinions on whether we think the idea is feasible, and also our perspective as potential users of that technology within the NHS. And they really are well run. And there's usually at least 6 to 8 public contributors on that video call. And we do make sure our views and opinions are definitely expressed. And then 1 or 2 of us may get asked to assist with the funding grant application, and we may get asked to be a co-applicant on any grant application that they put forward with our assistance. And I've done that a couple of times where I've been a co-applicant or I've helped inventors, innovators, clinicians associated with surgical medtech or otherwise submit grant applications.
Thank you, Manoj. So I'll take the opportunity to break there, and if there's any questions or any comments, happy to take those now. No, it's all clear. Can't see any hands up. Okay, good. All right, so I think so the first sort of discussion point, so the way we've laid this out is sort of have some key discussion points to anchor the discussion. So I think the first one we're going to look at is basically why is it important for researchers and companies, to work with members of the public and patients. Basically, Manoj will sort of give some examples that he can, obviously masking some of the details of the companies. But in terms of from our perspective, as I mentioned before, it's really important to have the patient voice, especially for devices that are going to be implanted in patients, or if you are required to wear something. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with, so those the hip implants, where it turned out that some of them started disintegrating, for example, once after a couple of years. Those are the things that we are trying to prevent. We also had, there's a vaginal mesh implants and the pelvic mesh implants that also happened where they were put in, and a lot of women, mainly women, predominantly women, experience horrific side effects. And some of them are still living with the long-term effects of that. And that's basically what the patient voice is there to do, is to ask those pertinent questions to actually say, how is this going to work? I am not saying that those particular instances didn't include that, because I'm not aware of the particular details and I didn't personally work on that. But the learning from those instances is we want to make sure that we consider everything, because if you are developing a new device, you're usually looking at it from the perspective of how useful it's going to be with somebody. But if you're not going to have it implanted or walk around with it, then you don't know what the impact of, someone jumping, for example, if someone decides to skip with an implant, what that's going to do to the implant device. Are they going to react to it? So there's all these questions that are not necessarily first nature to the people who develop technologies, but will actually be first nature to some of the things that you yourselves, other patients, carers, and other members of the public are likely to experience. So Manoj, are you able to give a few examples in terms of how, some of these are, where the importance of that patient voice actually comes in?
Yes, V, I'm happy to do that. And actually, I'm going to start with a classic example from another university where I was involved in a video call maybe 4-5 years ago. And that university is none other than the University of Oxford. So I was on a call with an academic clinician, and it was about knee braces. And they were putting forward a grant application for a new type of knee brace. And my sister's had a knee brace for about 8 years now. And what the academic clinician completely missed out was the fact that family members are not trained or given any advice on how to put a knee brace, how to fit it and make sure it sits comfortably on the knee for the person that needs the knee brace. And likewise, outside carers, paid carers that come into a family home are not given any training or awareness how to put a knee brace on so that it sits comfortably on a person's knee and works like it should. But that's an oversight on the part of the academic and clinician, which I had to point out. And I always mention that when I'm given this opportunity, how they forgot to look at things from a patient, carer, family perspective. But more specifically with Leeds Surgical MedTech, we've looked at all sorts of devices, including new methods of taking x-rays for patients who might have a brain tumor, cancer within the brain, which, as you can imagine, is very, very difficult to remove because, you know, it's not easy having access to the human brain without doing further damage. We've looked at devices that are attached to the body to measure various key performance indicators. And what we said was, how do you actually attach this gizmo to the body? How long will it stay attached? Will the patient suffer any pain and discomfort? How will you remove this item from the patient? Will there be any discomfort when you remove the gadget? How big is it? Can the patient sleep with this gadget if they're going to have it on at night? What is the cost of running this equipment if the person has it at home? This medical device, is it supplied freely on the NHS, or does the patient have to actually buy this medical equipment? Can they lease it? How often will it be refreshed, i.e. a new version comes out? Will they be given instructions how to use this medical device in the family home? All sorts of considerations that often are overlooked by academics, clinicians, those with a scientific outlook, want to develop the most wonderful scientific product because that's what they've been trained to do. That's what they live for, to bring on the market the most wonderful scientific gizmo. But is it practical as far as the patient, family, carer member is concerned? So we try to ground them in to say this might be the most wonderful scientific idea, but is it practical for the patient to use it and use it over a long period of time? Is it durable? Is it something that's sustainable? How often will it be revamped? A new version come out, etc., etc., etc. So there's been various devices. I can't think of all of them offhand. There was the X-ray machine for scanning, a new method of scanning potential brain scanners, brain cancer, which was very revolutionary. Various devices that are stuck to the body. A new method of potentially detecting foot ulcers, diabetic foot ulcers, using three-dimensional viewing of the foot and the ankle done by the patient and carers from home, sent electronically to a remote sensor, remote place where some health clinician will monitor the state of the ankle, the state of the foot, and indicate whether the person does have a diabetic foot ulcer and obviously the treatment required for it. That's just a few examples that springs to mind, V.
Yeah, thank you, Manoj. And I think the examples you've shown, especially if I go to the last one, where you know, the patients and their carers are expected to take images of their foot ulcers and send them through, which seems a really good way in terms of saving community nurses, because it's obviously the time for community nurses to come out to the home. And then obviously with COVID having come along, it's sort of impacted on that because it's reduced the frequency and the number of those visits. But at the same time, there's the questions around, well, actually, does the patient have a strong enough internet connection, or actually the security around the internet connection to be able to send their patient information wirelessly to another network? So those are questions that we now have to consider. Those are things that we need answered in order to make sure that we can put that technology into the NHS, because obviously we can sing the benefits of it, but if that went into the NHS and then it turned out that I could sit outside your home and actually just get the details as you're streaming them, then obviously you're not going to be happy about it. So those are the angles that we need to cover. And that is what the patient voice does, is it, as Manoj has highlighted, is it brings to light things that we normally would not think about, or things that we'd think, well, we just don't have the foresight, you know, to think about as researchers. Yes, Manoj.
Another thing we've highlighted is the difference between availability and accessibility. So whilst the medical equipment may be available, like say myself, I'm based in Greater Manchester, if this new device was based in Leeds, then it's not practical. Is it available, accessible locally to where I live? So distinguishing between what can be made available, but what is actually accessible by patients geographically, regardless of where they live, and would each and every NHS health trust be able to afford this new medical device? Because we want equality of access for all patients, not a selected few.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, because that's at the heart of the Department of Health agenda, is reducing health inequalities. And, you know, there's always talk about postcode lotteries and other things that impact on how people access their treatment. But that's definitely one of the things that we have to consider as well, in addition to the newly developing line around sustainability. So how do we make sure we develop technologies that are not wasteful? And that is very important for us in surgery, because apparently surgery is the one that generates a lot of waste in the NHS, particularly through you know, the use of gowns. There's a lot of disposable single-use equipment, and the history around that is apparently back before mad cow's disease. Hospitals used to actually recycle a lot of the equipment and sterilize it, but when mad cow's disease came in, then a decision was taken that, well, actually single use is better. And that's where the direction of travel went. So now you have perfectly good devices you use at once, and it basically has to be thrown away because they don't want to risk the infection. And highlighted that waste with the face masks, which is what the public could see. But there was a whole lot of waste also going on inside the hospital. So the questions now coming back again is, how do we reduce that waste? Yes, Manoj.
That's exactly the point, V, I was going to raise about the Green Surgery Grant application that Professor David Jane, the Director of Surgical Medtech, has put forward, looking at how to reduce wastage within this surgical process they go through as surgeons.
Yeah, definitely. Any comments? Anyone wants to come in and comment? No, is it all?
Can I make a general comment then? When I actually joined Surgical Medtech, I was nominated by another friend and colleague who's very established within patient public involvement work. And it was actually my very first engagement with medical devices. And I was a little bit apprehensive because till then I was only used to dealing with academics filling grant applications for like service improvement or the personal NIHR fellowship grant applications. I hadn't actually been involved with medical equipment, but it has been an eye-opener, and sometimes it can be very technical, the equipment that the inventor, innovator, academic is actually pushing. Mm-hmm. But our task as public members, public contributors, is to be grounded and tell them actually, can you explain this in plain English? What will this device do? What do you plan to do? Why do you plan to do it? How do you plan to do it? When do you plan to do it? But how will patients benefit? How will the NHS benefit in the long term? These are questions that we ask. You know, I want to know, how will this device benefit patients in Leeds General Hospital or in the surrounding areas, if that's the pilot area where they're going to introduce this new medical technology within the NHS.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a good point as well, because I think a lot of the patient and public involvement for research has historically centered on the pharmaceutical trials. So things to do with AstraZeneca, GSK, Johnson & Johnson. And that's mainly to do with being a clinical trial participant where you're recruited to take part in a study, and they basically conduct a research ethics approved procedures on patients so that they can get the information they need to make sure that this medicine is actually working and producing the desired effect. Whereas with the medtech side of things, that is actually still a developing field, which in some ways is a bit more exciting because there's room to actually shape what that involvement is actually going to look like. So you would have heard Manoj talk about, grant funding applications. And I know some people, the minute they hear that, they just think this is just too technical. There's no way I'm going to understand that. And it will be true to a certain extent. And, grant funding applications aren't for everybody. But there are other ways that people can actually get involved, So at the most base element, you've got events. So we do host a lot of events that are designed to raise awareness of what's happening within a particular topic area. So you can actually find out about the different disease areas might have different sort of event systems going on, but they typically take the form of a conference or a workshop or a seminar. And in most cases, anyone can register actually to attend those. And if it's hosted by an NHR unit, and you actually mention that you are a member of the public or you're a patient, then in most cases, they should actually reimburse your travel expenses if there's any of that involved. In our case, for instance, we pay anyone who gets involved with our PPIE work, we reimburse the activities. If they need to travel to go somewhere, we'll buy them the train ticket. If they need to have an overnight stay at a hotel, we'll pay for that as well. And we also pay for subsistence. So there's a certain amount that's allowed for food, for example, during the course of a day. All it takes is just submitting your receipts. In the good old days, you'd actually have to send them through the post. But I think now they accept, you can either scan them or send photographs of them, and then they will basically ask you to send them at a later stage for audit purposes. So that's the base level of involvement in just getting to find out what's happening within the research world. It might be that medtech development is not your particular field. You might be interested in early research, for example, which is where they do a lot of the lab stuff. And they've also got involvement groups and activities around that front. And you've got other people that get involved in actually designing events or designing training for public and lay members as well. So it just depends on what your strengths are and how you feel you want to contribute. The door is always open to have the conversations in terms of how you can input into that and what we are going to get out of it as well. You've got grant funding applications. This is where a lot of the times researchers and companies, they apply for funding to further develop their particular technology. And that involves submitting a very complex and often huge grant funding application. That is typically done by the company or the owner of the technology. However, public contributors, the way they shape that process is, in the first instance, it's about reading that application. And as Manoj said, it's making sure that it's in lay language. They're not using technical terms, because a lot of the funding bodies have got patient panels. So you, as a patient or member of the public, you can actually decide, I want to sit on these funding panels and find out actually what our taxpayers' money is funding and how they're making those decisions to fund that. And because of that, they do need to make sure the language they use in the application is not too technical. So there is that aspect of it. They need to make sure they include a strategy for how they're going to get the patient voice to inform the development. So the lay members on those funding panels, that's their job, is to make sure that, well, actually, they have included sufficient information in this. It's not just we've spoken to one or two people, they said it's a good idea, tick the box, and that's it. So Manoj, I'm not sure whether you can talk to your experience on funding, grant funding applications, because I know you've done a couple.
Yes, well, I've got over 11 years experience of reviewing grant applications. I used to sit on NIHR, which actually from 1st of April of this year has changed its name to the National Institute of Health and Care Research, because they fund social care research in addition to health research. I used to sit on their funding panel known as Research for Patient Benefit, and I was on the Northwest Board for 3 years. So this was the funding stream whereby academics and clinicians would submit a grant application up to the value of £250,000, £250,000, for any innovation invention that directly would benefit patients. So I was on that funding panel for, like I said, 3 years. And my task was not only to read the lay summary and then explain how good the lay summary was and what the message within it contained to the other 18, 20 members of the funding panel, but also to comment on the whole grant application and given about 5 to 7 minutes to summarize up to 30 pages of A4, and how genuine the patient public involvement section within the grant application was. And I'd be given, like I said, 5 to 7 minutes to summarize the lay summary and the quality of the lay summary, and also how genuine patient and public involvement was within the grant applications. And for many funding bodies, unless there is genuine evidence of patient public involvement in the grant application, they tend not to fund that particular grant application. And nowadays, I think 1 or 2 of the bodies actually insist on a public member being a co-applicant on the grant application, otherwise it's going to get rejected. So yes, I've reviewed the diabetic foot ulcer grant application. I've reviewed the one where the neurosurgeon at Leeds General Hospital and part of Leeds Surgical Medtech was applying for the grant application for new methods of imaging for brain tumors, brain cancer. That's just 2 that I can think of with my direct involvement at Leeds, but there have been others in the past. I can't remember all of them the last 2 years.
No, I wouldn't expect you to remember all of them, but yeah, major grant funding bodies that you sat on, Manoj. And I think it's also important to note that you don't have to be an accountant or have a finance background, for example, to sit, to review a grant funding application. The purpose of it is they want someone who is far removed from the actual research and technology itself to cast a fresh pair of eyes to see if there's anything that we've missed or if there's anything that actually stands out of that process. So it's not a matter of you need to have certain qualifications or a certain background to be able to contribute. Anybody can. You just need to have the interest in that particular technology or that particular clinical area, or it might be you've got lived experience or know someone or care for someone with lived experience of that particular condition that's being addressed. So that's usually the starting point for a lot of involvement. We do not ask for a lot. The main thing really is the interest in that research area.
V, what I would add is that as long as you're happy to read a fairly lengthy document and have the time to do so, and willing to act as, the phrase I'll use, critical friend, because remember, this is taxpayers' money that's being used, usually up to £250,000 grant application. So we have to ensure that taxpayers' money is not wasted. So we ask questions that need to be asked, but from a patient, carer, family and public member perspective.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And that's an important addition to the joys of working from home. Being asked to open a pack of jelly babies. Yeah, sorry for that. That's the importance. That's the beauty of it, is, as manager said, if you're dealing with funding applications, you've got to be prepared to read, and you've got to like reading stuff. It's the same thing for being asked to be part of a project team. So sometimes you can also be asked to join the project team, actually, as a patient, as a lay member. And the reason for that is it's to make sure that the patient voice is embedded throughout the entire development. Because what tends to happen is sometimes the patient voice is added right at the beginning, and then people disappear for about a year or 2 years. You don't know what's happening, and they come back, and they might come back with something that is actually not going to work, or is not actually going to meet the need of the patient, because they've missed that consistency throughout the process. And that's one of the things that we do, is we always encourage the innovators that once you take on a lay member, you've got to keep them engaged and keep them involved throughout the entire course of that particular project. It might be that you could decide, I want to be involved in the beginning, and then I'll get involved in just sharing the information within my networks, whether it's whatever events you go to. It might be you've got a discussion forum that you're part of. All of those things are what the innovators are looking, for patients and lay members to highlight to them, to say, well, actually, there's this group that does this. This will be really interesting to them. It might actually be as simple as that. But the level of involvement, definitely, the choice always rests back with you. We're not going to force you to do something that you're not comfortable with. And if you work with us as part of the NIHR, we are your intermediaries, if so to speak. So if you decide halfway through that I don't think this is working for me, this is what I was expecting, or this hasn't happened, or there's a breakdown in communication, I don't think the innovator understands what's going on, that is where we come in to actually understand, what's actually gone on. If someone needs something clarifying, then we can clarify that on your behalf and make sure that we're able to get things going, if that is what you want to do. And likewise, if you think you've had enough or you need to take a break, or quite often what happens is people's health sometimes gets in the way of things. That is perfectly fine. You can take a break and say, actually, for the next 6 months, can I just take a breather? I just need to focus on my health, or I need to focus on my family. That is perfectly fine as well. So this is not a binding contract where once you get involved, you can't pull out of it, or you're going to feel bad that you're letting us down. That's not what we are about. It has to fit in with your needs and your requirements.
Can I give one or two caveats, Bea?
Yeah.
Especially for people on this call who are very new to patient public involvement work.
Mm-hmm.
From my personal experience, and what I didn't say at the beginning was that I never planned any of this. This is as a result of me caring for my sister, who's been mentally ill for 35 years. I've had to adopt like a portfolio career looking after her whilst trying to survive myself. I never planned to do any of this patient public involvement work. But the advice I've been given by others and what's applied to myself is you start locally before you go nationally. So try and get involved with local NHS trusts, local universities, local colleges, etc., where there are opportunities to get involved in patient public involvement work, which then will build your confidence to get involved with more serious work. And before you know it, you will have built up a portfolio of maybe 4 or 5 different organizations, different groups that you belong to. And then you feel more comfortable doing this kind of patient public involvement work. My other caveat is sometimes academics and clinicians do have a habit of sending you, say, a grant application or some paperwork to read, and at very short notice. So sometimes it can conflict with our personal lives, but that's just the nature of the beast. And as Via said, you're not compelled to do anything. You can say, sorry, I cannot turn this document around in 3 days. The choice is yours, but, I'm giving you that advance warning. Clinicians, academics are very, very busy people. Sometimes they leave things to the very last minute. And it has happened to me more than once where I get a document through saying, it's Friday today, can we have this document back by Tuesday morning? And you've got to say, well, have I got a spare 4 to 6 hours to read this between today and Tuesday, review the grant application, review the plain English summary, read it, redraft it, and resubmit it to the academic in time. But communication from V and her colleagues Sheila and Roxana has always been excellent. They're on our side, and they try to help as best as they can.
Thank you, Manoj. So I guess one of the things I want to do is I'm keen to sort of hear back from obviously Mary, Anthony, Michelle, Sharon. So I'll sort of start off with a question in terms of, what's your level of familiarity or experience with clinical research in the NHS? Have you come across it? Have you heard of it?
No, I hadn't, to be quite honest. But I used to work in the NHS and in teaching. So, and I taught NHS type courses. So grant applications are familiar to me as a document. Are you with me? Proving your case to take on work. So that sort of side of it is. So, and I'm locally involved in the PPG. I'm the chair of the PPG locally, Health Watch, and that sort of thing. So it's in my life, probably in my blood, So it doesn't seem too overwhelming. So I would hope that I would get a handle on it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Who wants to go next? Yes, Sharon.
Hi, yes, I'm one of two public co-producers on a pelvic prolapse grouping at the moment. It stalled a bit because the initial grant wasn't accepted, but it's all ramping up again now. So I can imagine it's going to get a bit hairy from now on in.
And what's been your experience of that?
Very supportive. I mean, really, it's through University of Newcastle, part of the Voice.
Yeah.
Via Voice, so very supportive. Some of the, as everybody has said, some of the language, some of the concepts are a bit technical, but that's what we're there for. We're there to say, whoa, wind it down, guys. This is not something that a patient or a member of the public is going to have any idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And plus I used to be, and unfortunately had to put a stop to it because of timetabling clash, used to be on the review board of as a lay reader. So people would present, as you're saying, they would present their project, and I was part of the online board listening to and commenting on the lay side of it. So it's interesting to see how different mindsets work. Shall I put it that way?
And I think that's more prevalent, especially for medical technology, because it's different. So for pharmaceutical, you definitely need your chemists and people who studied the real hardcore sciences. With medical technology, you've got a mix of engineering. You can have design and textiles. You can have the clinical person. So it really is an eclectic mix of people.
And as you said, sometimes people have a great idea, but it's solving a problem that doesn't exist.
Yes.
It's kind of like they make a problem so they can solve it.
Yeah.
And often when somebody's in that world, they forget they're in an echo chamber. So that's also, I mean, I've seen some great stuff, but like as Manoj was saying, and you said, what's the point of it really?
And I think you put it beautifully. It's an echo chamber, and we're there to pull them out of it and put them in the real world to say, actually, this is lovely, but people are not going to use it the way you want them to use it. I'd love to give an example, but that it would probably give it away if the company was watching this. But they basically had a device for detection of something that patients could use in their homes, but they hadn't taken into account that this might be a device a family member might not want everybody else to see. It needed to be fixed somewhere in the home. It needed to be cleaned. It's like, no, it's a very good idea, but I don't think I want everybody to know that's what I'm looking at the moment.
And also just to reassure other people that I have never found, if there's been technical or jargon used, that and we have questioned it, they have never ever done anything but support us. They've never tried to belittle us or go, what do you mean you don't know what this acronym is? They've always been super supportive. So I've always found it really enjoyable. So I would say to everybody else, get in on it.
That's good to hear. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Michelle.
Okay, I'm a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Yeah, that's okay.
I did 19 years in the police force, and I've just recently joined Newcastle University and the Trust as a research project manager. So I've probably spent about the last 5 or 6 years working with academics and clinicians on project work, which is various project work. So at the minute I'm on a robotic surgery project, which, as you can imagine, is very intense, and that's a national project. And I've just kindly recruited about 15 PPIs who are very specialized in clinical artificial intelligence data, and from the Royal College of Surgeons specifically to work on this project. However, because I'm a research project manager, my role is totally different. I actually line manage, if you like, and guide and help and support the PPI group. But my role is not as a PPI person. And I found there's a bit of a gap there, and I want to be part of that, but my role is it's a different pathway. So hence, coming on the call today, because I want to move as a volunteer into that role, because when I go to steering groups and etc., that's not my role. So sometimes I have to kind of bite my tongue and think, well, no, it's not you, Michelle, you shouldn't be questioning it. That's down to the PPI members. So there was a bit of a gap, really, that I kind of felt I wanted to be part of, which is away from my day job, but wanted to be part of that for various reasons. I'm a carer for my mum. I've had surgery. So I'm kind of that lost person that's wanting to be involved with it, but it's got to be separate for what I do in the daytime job. So hence why I'm on the call today.
No, I think that's a good point that you raise, and thank you for that, because I used to do research project management many moons ago, and it is a sort of dilemma where it's like, no, I'm actually working for the researchers. I can't then interject and do all this stuff. But I think with doing all the medtech focus groups that we do, I think it sort of expands. You start to become aware of all the things that you don't know and all the things that could be working. And I guess my follow-on question to you is, in an ideal world, how do you think you would fill in that gap? Or what would you need to make you think you've filled that gap?
To probably challenge from a member of the public, as a carer, as somebody who's used the trust previously, who's been a patient, rather than be in the interest of the professor, the surgeon, etc., where I have this professional pulling the bid together, working with data scientists. It's my job is to learn it and to understand it, to project manage it. What I want to do is I can't voice, well, my mum's had that, and as a carer I've done that, because that's not what my role is. So I want that kind of void kind of filling, because it's
Okay.
become ever more increasing, because I'm feeling a bit restricted that I can't do that. So I want an avenue that I can go down to be part of, either being a member or checking as a layperson reports, etc., or generally, you know, challenging, you know, as a member of the public, exactly what Manoj has actually said. You know, that's the void that I've got, that I would like to fulfill, because then I think, and there's a bit missing, and I feel as though in order, I think they would support each other but not be conflicting. But I think they would bounce off each other, and it would work. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. It makes sense, because it's it's sort of it's like a chicken and egg situation, but not in a negative sense. But it's like, once you start contributing, then you sort of know what you need to do in your job, and sort of you start to build in proper contributions from the public, as a result of you actually getting involved and seeing what it looks like. From the other side. So I mean, you probably would be aware, because I know in Newcastle there's the Voice, or Voice Global, which they're starting to roll out nationally. But I know the hospitals have got their own PPI groups, but they tend to be focused on the care of the patient. So actually how the hospital is doing things, not actually how new technology is coming in. But if you were interested in certain areas, you could just send us an email and let us know the different areas, because what you'll find is, because the NHR really is vast, there's lots of different units.
I understand.
You know, I can pin, if I know what you're interested in, what clinical areas you're interested in, or what activities, then I can introduce you to the different PPI groups that work in those particular areas, and then you can start to get invited or aware of certain opportunities that are coming, because they're definitely there. And we do work with a few people who work within research, and they also attend PPI groups for certain things or different areas, and they do find it beneficial.
Yeah, that would be lovely. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to have to give me apologies now, because speaking of which, I have to go and see my mum to give her medication.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I'll be getting told off. I'll be getting told off when I turn up late.
No, we're not going to get in the way of that, but I will share the recording so you can see the last bits.
Michelle, you're not the only one. I have to count out 28 tablets a day for my sister, 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock lunchtime, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and 9 o'clock again at night. Good luck.
Yes. I'm the Dalton daughter.
Yeah, no, you're doing the right thing. But thank you, Michelle.
Well, it was lovely meeting everybody, and hopefully I'll meet you again soon.
Okay,
Bye.
Okay,
Bye,
lovely
Michelle.
to see you all. Bye.
Bye. Okay, and last but not least, Anthony. You're on mute.
Better?
Yep, can hear you now.
Yeah. Well, I've taken part in clinical research at the Brompton in the past, particularly along clinical research on antibiotics. And also more recently, a study on digital tools in heart failure, a survey of patient usage. That was really a questionnaire on the way in which they use IT to contact patients these days and have consultations and so on. and that's it. That's been my own. No, I did volunteer to take part in the COVID-19 vaccination research, but unfortunately I was asked to take part in it after I'd had my first inoculation of the Pfizer vaccine, which so it was too late to take part in it by then. But they've kept in touch with me ever since and still send me their newsletter. And that's as far as I've got in clinical research. I'm not quite sure how you got hold of me for this one. For this,
I wouldn't have got hold of you, but we would have distributed the details of the forum, and someone's probably sent it to you to register.
yeah.
Yeah. So what we do is because we're always keen to get different voices and different people involved in the work that we do.
Right.
We work closely with different types of organizations, and they agree to send stuff on their mailing list. So I wouldn't know which one it was. But
Well,
if you're involved with any patient charities or associations, it's probably where it's come from.
in a lot of my local PPG, GP's PPG, the PPG at the Brompton, and also in I'm a patient peer leader, if you've ever heard of that. And that has taken me into co-production, and I'm a member of the London Strategic Co-Production Group for the introduction of ICS. And from that, a number of other committees, and a member of the older people's sounding board in the National Health. A lot of patient consultative roles. So I'm willing to help the NHS, is what it amounts to. That's possibly why you've got hold of my name, or I put my name forward for consideration. Yeah. I'm here. I have
you would have put your name.
background, and I also have quite an arts background as well.
Oh, no, that's, and would you say you are aware of where you can access opportunities for clinical research specifically?
Well, I'm aware that they come up from time to time, and if they cross my path and I like the look of them, I might take part in them. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. That's what we want.
There's a lot of opportunities for doing so. I don't cross the paths of older people these days.
No, that's fine. No, I just wanted to know how easy it was for people to come across this information, because I think so far it seems accessing the PPG group seems to be a whole lot easier to do than actually finding out all the research stuff. And I think what the NHR is trying to do over the course of the next 2 weeks is they're trying to sort of raise awareness of the different ways you can get involved, because it's be part of research. That's the campaign they're running, and it's off the back of International Clinical Trials Day, which was last Friday. So they use that opportunity basically to raise awareness of clinical research. So that's why I was asking the questions, because then that helps us look for new methods of reaching a wider group of people. And historically, we've tended to do that using research charities or patient charities, or through our social media platforms is how we typically tend to do that. But if there was another platform that we're missing, then we're interested to hear of that. It's not pushing research down people's throats, but if people are interested, then it's just making sure there's an easy place for them to access it.
Well, I make use of a lot of medical technology. I have an ordinary hearing aid in this year. I have a bone-attached hearing aid in that year.
Yeah.
I have a defibrillator. So I'm aware of personal digital technology, which is part of me now.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. So we've come up to the end of our session, and just wanted to briefly find out whether you found this useful, whether you found out something different, something new, because obviously we're planning on running these on a monthly basis, but each month we'll have a different focus. We'll be breaking down the different components. So instead of trying to fit in everything patient and public related into 1 hour, we're going to break it down into sessions. So is there anything, so first of all, how have you found it? And the second question is there anything in particular you want us to cover in more depth for a future session, which you might or might not attend, but might benefit others?
Been a whole new world to me, I must say. I didn't actually, the reality of it is, oh, I didn't know that was going on. So
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, part of what I see at the moment, because I am retired, is that I want to do the best for the people that I am with, which are the public,
Yeah.
and to maintain that voice.
Yeah.
So this is an extension of that, really. And I still enjoy learning new things. So for me, it's intriguing. I would like to be useful, you know. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to find out more, but I mean, I'd like to know whether or not somebody like me would be useful to you.
No, definitely. There's no one who's not useful in the work that we do. So we do have people with a similar sort of background to you, where it's the first time they've heard of it and they're not sure whether they can be useful. And I think as Manoj highlighted previously, where he sort of landed into it by, it wasn't a planned route. But basically what tends to happen is once people sort of understand what's going on, because a few people, when they start, they usually use maybe the first couple of months is just to observe and just to take in what's going on and to just see how people are interacting with each other, what people are doing, before they actually start feeling confident enough to actually start contributing or actually raising their hand or saying, hang on a minute, this has gone on too far. So that's perfectly fine. So I wouldn't say, I would say, don't feel you wouldn't be useful. You definitely would be. And I would definitely encourage you to, any opportunities you can to attend or get involved, even if it's just as an observer, please take those, because then that helps you decide what type of involvement you want to do and what types of activities you want. So we do allow for that. If you were to join our group, we wouldn't say on day one, Mary, what do you think? Do you think she should go or not? We're not going to do that. You might actually sit quietly through the whole thing and then say bye like everybody else. And, but then that might start a thought process later on, and you might feel comfortable asking questions on email later on. So we're open to the type of involvement that works for you. And we also sort of believe in a model of building up your confidence. We're not going to push you to do things. If you think you need to find out a bit more about a particular area, then we can do that. So just as an example, we have a couple of people who are really interested in robotics, because we do a lot of work for robotics in terms of colonoscopies, for the diagnosis of colorectal cancer. And we are in the process of organizing an awareness day for them, where they're actually going to sit with the engineers at the University of Leeds, and they're going to talk them through this robot. They're going to have the opportunity to handle this robot and sort of ask the questions, in a non-judgmental environment. So those are all the things that we can definitely facilitate to help your learning. So if learning's what you want to do, you can pick whatever area of learning you want, and we can facilitate that.
Yeah, well, I come across quite a lot of different types of people. Are you with me? Elderly, young,
Yeah.
pregnant, sort of kids, university, and that sort of stuff. So I really sort of, I just am hungry to make sure that people get the best that they can, and this is one way to, I think, do that in a way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we don't discriminate. So it doesn't matter how young or old you are. We want everybody to have the opportunity to contribute. Some technologies might be more applicable to someone who's 18. Some of them might be more applicable to someone over 75, for example. But your perspective is always going to be important.
Okay, lovely. That's great. Oh, you may not be able to hear me very
well.
well.
I mean, if you're interested, I mean,
Sorry.
I can hear you now. No, you're loud now, but I could hear you before.
Oh, okay, lovely. I forget.
Yeah, and I was just saying, if you are, I mean, give it some thought. No, it's okay. But give it some thought. I will send out with the link for this video. I'll send out a link to our mailing list where you can sign up for specific topics that we do, and just give it a go. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Sharon, Anthony, any last thoughts, or Manoj, do you want to say something, add anything before we start signing off?
Well, might be an idea for you to mention that for those people that are registered public contributors, we have the quarterly meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we do have the quarterly meetings, which are more strategic. So they're more or less looking, strategy is your kind of thing, and looking at reports and deciding whether what we are doing is a good or bad thing. Then that is something you can definitely apply to be part of that committee. You can also apply to observe as well our management group meetings, which are every 6 weeks. So you can apply to attend as an observer and just see the types of things we talk about. In the management group meetings, you've got your surgeons, you've got your engineers, you've got all sorts of people, and we sometimes have a presentation from a company on their technology. So you're more than welcome to actually say, I just want to sit in on these things and actually see what you people do at a high level. Yeah, but the opportunities are there if you just want to shadow, that we can make that happen as well. You don't have to sign up fully. You can observe and then decide whether it's something you really want to be a part of. Okay, great, Sharon. Okay, that's good. So I shall, and I think, so basically, just to round off, the opportunities are there. If surgery is not your particular area, then let me know. I can definitely direct you to another bit of the NIHR that actually does whatever particular area that you're interested in. If you do join any of these committees or any of these groups, your time is always reimbursed. So that's the Department of Health rule. We can't let you contribute and provide your expertise and your perspectives for free. So anyone who attends any of our focus groups, for example, we do pay them on an hourly rate, depending on how much time they've spent. If you're going to review grant funding applications or do project work, we make sure that your time is actually built into that. And you are paid, you are reimbursed for that. So it's not necessarily on a payroll, but it's just acknowledging that your perspective is equally as important as everybody else's. So I can make those details available in terms of what the rates are. They're not a secret. They're on the general NIHR website, but might be a bit more difficult to find if you don't exactly know where you're supposed to go and where to look for things. So that's one thing I thought I would add. It's not that we're trying to entice people with money, but I think it's that acknowledgement is there because our public contributors put in a lot of work in their own time. They're not paid out of the ordinary hours to do this. And that's just a recognition of that as well. And yeah, if you think this might be interesting to somebody else, then obviously send them the link that you used to register because it's got additional dates on it. If you think of something else after this call that you think, hang on, I should have said this, I should have mentioned this, then please do that as well. And then we can obviously look at including some of your suggestions as we go through, because we do want to make this more of a permanent thing where people can just ask questions or just listen without feeling like they have to perform for a group of people. You know, hence the forum that we've set it in. So Manoj, have you got any parting words?
I think I've said enough today.
Well, I'd like to thank Manoj for his contribution, because he's supported us for a very long time, and he can tell you that we do actually consider what people say to us, and we do what we can to actually enact those suggestions and those comments. We don't just, it's not lip service with us. And you'll also be able to tell you that there's lots of exciting technologies that are out there, and it's an interesting learning experience for us as well, you know, to find out what, you know, people think of and how they manage to develop these things. But thank you for staying. I know it's past the hour. I will send out a link to the recording as soon as it tells me it's finished. It might be early tomorrow morning, depending on how long it takes. I will also send you the link to where you can sign up for our particular mailing list, which is for surgery-related research. But you can also use that form to tell me what other areas you want me to direct you to, and I will make that information available to you. And yeah, if there's anything else that comes up, then you've got our email address. Definitely get in touch with us. We're very responsive, as Manoj will attest, and you know, we'll make sure that you get the information that you need.
That was great, Lee. Thank you so much. It's been lovely meeting you all.
Thank you for being great.
Bye all.
I shall let you claim the rest of your evening, but thank you very much.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Gosh, I always had trouble getting out of these.